We just got back from our first travel tournament of the year. It was in Indianapolis, Indiana, for the Brickyard Battle, which was hosted by the AAU and JVA. And on social media, we got a number of very interesting comments of people saying that we were sandbagging and playing against lower level teams. I find that very interesting, but I feel like there's actually a better conversation to be had about club directors' tournament selection process. So I'm going to walk you through a little bit of why we chose to go to Indianapolis versus other events throughout this time of the year, for at least for our club. So let's jump right into it. First things first, we are always trying to find the most competitive schedule we possibly can for our athletes. There's a number of factors that go into it, from the teams that you're going to see, the college recruiting showcase opportunities, as well as some other logistical things, right? What's the travel look like? What's the cost going to be for our families? So on and so forth. So first up, we have the competitive landscape. Now, competitive landscape can be seen as a couple different things. You can see it as the teams that are just the best in the country, and you're trying to compete against them every single opportunity you can get. You can see it as the chance to go out and compete against teams that are from different areas. In our case, we looked at the potential options on this weekend for our first travel event as two options. There was technically three. You had the Brickyard Battle, which this year took over for the Chi-Town Challenge because they couldn't book the Chicago Convention Center. You had the Long Beach event, which was basically another SoCal Cup event, though they said it's not run by SoCal Cup. It was definitely affiliated in some capacity. And then you had, for us, a more regional tournament run by the WCVBA that was going to be held in Fresno. Now, we just finished up 3 months of regional Northern California play. We've seen all that Northern California has to offer over the past 3 months, and we were definitely looking for some form of outside competition. So that removed the WCVBA event for us right off the bat. We wanted to get out, go see someone new. So that then left the AIM Sports Group tournament in Long Beach and the Brickyard Battle in Indianapolis. Now, when we look at the competitive landscape on the whole, Southern California definitely has the highest level, highest concentration of top teams if you look at AAU results. But Brickyard Battle was going to be bringing in the majority of Midwest and East Coast top teams that, according to results from last year, had very high finishes. Across all divisions, there was going to be gold bracket contenders for all of our teams to be able to compete against. Now, the depth of the overall tournament at Brickyard would probably be slightly lower in comparison to Southern California, but there was still a high enough opportunity for our athletes to go out and compete against teams that they're going to need to see or going to have to face come national championships in Orlando. So in our eyes, getting out there and having an opportunity to see all of these teams once before we even get out to Orlando was a huge advantage for us, and something that we wanted to get under our belt and see what we were working up against. Club culture. Now, number 2 is a little more unique to us and our club at Beta Bay, but it's all about club culture. See, the SoCal Cup tournament only had 15, 16, 17s, and 18s divisions, and they were only running open divisions. So that means we would have been able to get maybe 8 of our teams in to compete in this tournament. Everyone else would then need to go to our local tournament. Now, in our eyes, we are always looking to provide the best experience possible for our teams. Our teams from 1s down to national level, which would be our 4s teams, are competitive, extremely competitive when you put them in the divisions at AAU. So we always want to try and keep our club together under one roof wherever possible. When we finished up our Northern California regional play, there were so many weekends of tournaments where you don't get to see other teams in your club compete or play. And as a club director, you really miss out on some of the development and challenges that they might be going through that you can help them with. Also just being able to go and support them. So getting them all under one roof in a large convention center tournament really bodes well from a club director standpoint, because one, it's easier logistically of getting everyone in that one same spot. All of your coaches can go and support each other. All of the parents are together, and you get a lot of team bonding aspects that go outside of that. If we were to split up the club and send 8 teams to Southern California and then 13 teams down to Fresno, or maybe just don't send some of the teams to Fresno, just don't have a tournament weekend that weekend, it would be a completely different experience for the club on the whole. In this case, going to Brickyard allowed us to get all of our teams in under one roof, getting them the same opportunity to compete in their respective divisions and be able to go and watch all of the other teams. So our 11s team was able to go and watch our 18-1s team play the whole weekend. Our 18-1 team was then able to go down and reciprocate and show some love to our youngest teams, which was super cool to watch and see. And so club culture-wise, that was one of probably the biggest deciding factor of why we chose to go to Indianapolis over the other tournament events. Now, number 3 is an interesting one as well. It definitely was a factor in my mind when we were talking about which event to go to. And it is actually going to be reciprocity. Now, reciprocity is basically the idea that you want to reciprocate the efforts of someone else. So the Midwest and the East Coast is always traveling out to California. They travel out at least 2 times a year for most of the top clubs, and they're coming out this way. Now, we in Northern California are always traveling. It's always either Northern California regional play. We don't have anyone that ever comes up to us. Now, that's something we would love to see in the future, but we can kind of feel that same sentiment that the Midwest and the East Coast has, where when California teams don't come out to them, it's a frustrating experience because you have to constantly travel out to them to go play. So the idea of reciprocity being that the Midwest deserves to have a high-level tournament that brings the whole country together is certainly something we believe in. I think it helps grow the sport in the right ways by getting teams out into that environment, into that place, right? You look at AAU Nationals in Orlando, the amount of Florida teams that have cropped up because of the scale of that event there and the ability for them to get teams to that event relatively easily has helped really boom the boys volleyball space in Florida. Same idea in the Midwest, same idea in other places that you want to see it grow and develop. USA Volleyball does a really good job of this, actually. They have their Texas event. They targeted Utah, trying to get some more growth in that area, utilizing events as kind of the kindling to throw on the fire, if you will. So reciprocity being another one, making sure that we are heading out west or heading out east to the Midwest or to the East Coast and getting involved in that volleyball culture and being a part of it and being a staple and not being afraid to travel and get out of our little bubble and out of our little comfort zone to get out there and compete. Number 4, this is an interesting one. It is seeding perspective. Now, if you're unfamiliar with how national seeding works, essentially what they're doing is they have a number of large events that they are taking into consideration from a seeding standpoint. So it's SoCal Cup events. It is the Brickyard Battle. There is the Brew City Battle, I believe, as well, and some events in Florida that they kind of pull their information from. What the seeding committee is looking for is how you finish in these big, large events, and then they're looking for how you can stack up against other teams from other events. And so you usually are going to see some form of a seeding committee that's going to overview all those results. They're going to look specifically at SoCal Cup events, like the one in June. They're going to look at that Chicago event in June right before Nationals. That's kind of the final tune-up event. And they're going to see those teams, how they finish, where they're kind of trending towards, and they're going to work their way backwards all the way into November where these large events take place. And the quality of your finish at each of the large events is kind of the number one piece of your seeding criteria. And then it gets a little bit more nitty gritty, right? How do you compare teams that haven't played against each other at all, haven't been in the same event, so you can't stack them up? Well, you look at common opponents. So now for us, as a Beta Bay perspective, we're going to be a common opponent for the vast majority of the country. We played in the Midwest. We go to the Indy event. We have a ton of East Coast teams. We have a ton of Midwest teams. Now, when we go back and we play in Southern California events, we play in the SoCal Cup events in Vegas and LA, those results will now kind of help stagger out how each team stacks up in terms of competitive level. So when it comes time to see the actual tournament, Beta Bay teams will be used a lot as in my eyes at least, would be used a lot as a point of reference for where teams will stack up against each other. That was one of the biggest benefits of the Chi-Town Challenge that all the Southern California teams used to come to as well, was that you got that really early nationals experience, that national tournament level of competition where all of those teams are already competing against each other and you see how they stack up early in the season. And then you can really have a good tracing point from, hey, here's where they started, here's where they finished. We have those common opponents and how they're kind of stacking out. So it really helps with the seeding perspective. So now you're really going to have to rely on those common opponents, and Beta Bay will probably be one of the most common ones that you'll see because we're going to be have results against Midwest teams and East Coast teams as well as Southern California teams once we finish up our 3 SoCal Cup events. And last but not least, number 5, that's going to be novelty. We are human beings. We crave something new all the time. As much as we want routine, we also want to be surprised. We want to get out. We want to experience something. And so the novelty of going to Indianapolis and getting out and competing against teams that are out of our area is huge, right? We just finished up 3 months of regional play in Northern California. We have seen the Mountain Views. We have seen the NCVCs, the Aspires, the Cores, the Absolutes. We've seen them so much. So we don't need more of that. That's why we didn't go to the WCVBA event. We don't need to go to the Southern California event because we're going to play 3 SoCal Cup events back to back to back pretty much, or December, January, and then again in June. So we're going to have plenty of crossover with those teams, which of course we need to see as well. So getting out of our time zone, actually getting into Eastern time zone, was an interesting perspective for our athletes to get and get early on in the season, for them to bond, be together at hotels, and experience a city, get out, and just have more time together in a unique way is a really positive experience, as long as the price isn't ridiculous. So in our eyes, the novelty piece was kind of the last little cherry on top of, this is just going to be a unique experience for our athletes that they're not going to get. The Long Beach event will be different, but it's going to be very much the same in many ways. And so getting an opportunity to get out, see new teams, see new city, and have that travel experience together as a team is a beneficial one. So that was the reason why we went to Indianapolis, not to, quote, go beat up on shitty teams, because if you really are going to say that the 600 plus teams that were at Brickyard Battle were bad, then you are just severely uninformed. The HP St. Louis's, the Mods, the 630s, the Winter Parks of the world are very high level clubs with very high level teams, and are absolutely going to be in the competition come July when we're competing for national championship. There you have it. Hope that's helpful for you. Happy Thanksgiving this week. Be kind to people out there, and we'll see you next week.